Hi, I'm Paul Alistair Collins. I'm an award-winning wildlife photographer, and today I'm going to show you my top 10 photos of 2025 and the stories behind them. So at the start of every new year, I really like to sit down with a cup of tea and my laptop and look back through my photos from the previous year. Now, I really recommend that every wildlife photographer does this because it's a really good way to evaluate your creative processes and see how they're evolving, and also come up with new ideas for the next year. This year's review was particularly interesting for me because when I look back through hundreds, perhaps even thousands of photos, what stuck with me was not the patience, the technical skill, the experience required to take those photos. What I remember is the brief moment of looking through the camera viewfinder and feeling my breath catch. Of course, not every photograph has to make you gasp, but for me now, if I don't see that initial flicker of recognition somewhere, then it's probably not a defining image for me, and it doesn't make the cut. And that feels as good a selection process as any. So here are my top 10 photos of 2025. So first up, we've got a Dalmatian pelican from Greece, and this was at the very start of my photographic year. This is from one of my photography tours to Lake Kerkini. Kerkini is the place that keeps on giving, and it's the reason why I take groups of wildlife photographers there every January and February. On this particular morning, we had it all. We had pelicans all around our boat, beautiful golden sunlight, reflection shots, silhouettes, and this particular individual was, a couple of feet away from me. And for this particular shot, I held my camera over the side of the lake. Don't worry about getting your camera a little bit wet. They're pretty resilient nowadays. And I held my camera over the side of the lake with the flip screen up so that I could see what I was doing. So for those interested in the EXIF data, I was actually shooting this with a 50mm lens, which is a real treat. I was shooting around f3.5 and 300th of a second, so letting lots of light in and also low ISO just to balance that out and get that nice kind of silhouetted look. And it was really getting my camera as low down to the water as possible to catch that beautiful glint of sunlight on the water and that golden light and some of that bokeh, and then waiting for the pelican to do something of interest. And just for a moment it opened its bill as if it was drinking up that sunlight. And very little I had to do, just let the light in and let the moments do the work. So, strong start. Next up is a photo taken actually at the end of the year, and not somewhere exotic, but somewhere actually just 10 minutes down the road from where my parents live in Hampshire. This is a kingfisher, and just look at it. It's absolutely beautiful subject. Never fail to capture the imagination, and there's a lot of creative potential with them. On this particular day, it was a really, really gloomy winter day, and actually you might think that's a terrible kind of condition to photograph such a fast flying subject like a kingfisher, but actually it's absolutely perfect if you have flash. And this is a location that I know very, very well, where we have regular kingfishers regularly coming to this pond, and we set up flash guns around the side of the lake and predict where the kingfisher is going to perch and where it's going to dive. And then whenever the kingfisher dived, we'd set off a couple of softbox flashes, which it was also very used to. And it's just a little bit different from freezing the bird, where you get the droplets perfectly suspended in the air. It's a little bit more electric, and that's what I love about kingfishers. If you've ever seen a kingfisher zip down a river, it's that beautiful electric blue flash that sticks with you. And I wanted to essentially capture a shot of that fizzing quality. So EXIF data, again, I'm using 400mm lens, so a telephoto lens, shooting about 1/50th of a second, which allows that little blur in the kingfisher's wings and also in the water. And then I was using 2 off-camera flashes either side, and a fairly high aperture around f8 just to make sure that the subject's in focus. And also the really cool thing about using flash with a subject is that all the colours of the kingfisher and the water really pop, but actually the background remains completely black. So it has this kind of studio effect. So if you want to get impactful birds and flight shots, and it creates these really dramatic shots. So moving on to number 3, and these aren't in any particular order, but number 3, Egyptian vulture. Wow, look at that bird. This was the first time I'd ever seen this species. This is my second photographic tour of the year, following hot off the heels of Greece. This is in the Spanish Pyrenees. And it is vulture paradise. You get griffon vultures, black vultures, bearded vultures, and even more rarely the Egyptian vulture, of which there's only a couple in the area. The only way to get close to these birds is by using a photographic hide, so that the bird doesn't know that you're there. And I waited about 6 hours in a hide halfway up a mountain, hoping that I might see them, and it was just within the period that they might start arriving, and sure enough I had these two magnificent birds just drop down meters away from me and then even inches away from the window. So there was a little pond directly in front of the hide which the Egyptian vulture decided to take a bath in, and whilst it was bathing it would close its eye membrane to stop water or bits of grit getting into its eye. For a really brief moment its face took on this really unexpectedly stark expression, a little bit like a death mask. In ancient Egypt, this species symbolised rebirth through its role as a scavenger bird. So in this brief moment where it closed its eye and kind of took on this really deathly look, it kind of felt like an echo of that, kind of suspended between death and rebirth. This was a really special moment. I'd never seen an Egyptian vulture before, so this was a particularly special moment to start the year with, which makes this an even more special photo for me. So that was photo number 3, a wonderful moment with another spectacular bird. And this fourth image now is of a species much closer to home and also very close to my heart, the banded demoiselle. So this is a kind of very, very dainty little dragonfly, quite common along chalk streams in the UK and in summertime, but I'd never got around to photographing them until last year. What I really love about this shot is having photographed them now quite a few times, I wanted to go more tight into details. I was using a Sony 200-600mm lens with a 2x teleconverter, so effectively shooting at around 1200mm, and it became like this ultra macro lens, shooting quite high ISO around 3000 because I was losing considerable amounts of light with this focal length, f13 to get the whole thing beautifully in focus. Shutter speed, a couple of hundredths of a second. I was doing handheld, so actually I'm quite impressed I managed to pull that off with 200th of a second shutter speed. The high aperture was very essential to get that crispness, which is crucial for macro shots. It was late afternoon light on this demoiselle's wing that was revealing this very intricate hieroglyphic structure, a little bit like a circuit board, some people have said. Kind of looks quite electric, quite similar to the Kingfisher, the coloration. There's a lot of diagonal flow of the veins which create movement in the shot, even though it's a static subject. But I just find when you get in very, very close to subjects, it reveals these quiet details, qualities of light, texture that you wouldn't see otherwise if you're, far away. And it's a kind of photo that I think you can appreciate as an abstract, but also you can appreciate it scientifically as part of an insect, and it just shows how marvellous the natural world is. And there was a chance to do something very different with actually a very common subject and see it in a very different way. So, photo number 5, back to the birds and another of my favourite photo locations. This is at the remarkable Canopy Tower in Panama, a keel-billed toucan caught in a rainstorm. So I take photography groups to Panama every May, so that's at the start of the rainy season, at the peak times of bird migration. Now, I personally think you can't experience the rainforest without experiencing the rains. And from the hotel restaurant window, one of our guests spotted this toucan sheltering in the canopy from the rain. This is the environment that toucans live in. So photographing in the rain is a little bit more interesting, a bit more edgy. I was shooting around 100th of a second, around 100th or even slower. You get longer streaks of rain, and the slower you take down your shutter speed, so like 1/50th of a second, even 1 second, you can get really nice long streaks. It's the sense of the rainforest here. Looking at this shot now, I can practically hear and smell the rain, but I'm also using the leaf directly in front of the toucan here because it feels like you're peering into the animal's world unobtrusively. You're just an observer. And it's a very nice way of leading the viewer into the experience. There's plenty of breathing space on the left side of the frame for the toucan to look into and just kind of contemplate the falling rain. There's that beautiful top light from the sun bouncing on the toucan's bill there. A lot of people might think to get beautiful colours you need to go out in the middle of the day when the sun is bright, but actually having cloud over the sun creates this really nice softbox effect where you get very, very punchy colours. So this, again, one of my favourite shots of the year because it's just full of atmosphere, full of colour and full of personality. Here's pick number 6, back to Greece. Not a pelican this time, but a great white egret. Now I absolutely adore egrets. They're the species that got me into photography in the first place. There's something very prehistoric and statuesque and quite quirky about them that really captures my imagination. Here, space was the subject. So actually, I had an egret in a wetland hunting for little shrimps or crustaceans, and this was similar conditions to that toucan shot where the sun was high in the sky, but it was very overcast. I decided to actually overexpose my photo and make it high key. So I used a low aperture around f8, so wide open. Then I had a fairly low shutter speed of around 1/500th, and then my ISO, it was around 500 ISO. So that is flooding the camera sensor with light. And the effect is that you get this scene devoid of clutter. It's incredibly minimalist and very graphic, with the emphasis being the little stunts of grass and their reflections. And then this egret, which is less than 5% of the photo, but it's very clearly the focus. The eye of the egret and the beak is running through the right-hand vertical third, and there's that tiny little slice of yellow color on its beak, which just lifts it from a monochrome image into something with a bit more dimension. And that forward-leaning posture of the egret as well, just giving a sense of the egret hunting. Full of atmosphere and also graphic design, so another one that made this year's cut. And staying put in Greece for image number 7, I have to say Lake Kerkini in North Greece, it's a wonderful place for wildlife photography. Your imagination goes completely wild with the pelicans there. As you saw in the first photo, there's incredible opportunities to photograph pelicans at close range. So not a surprise that this next photo is of a pelican. There's different species of pelican here, the great white pelican, here in its stunning pink breeding plumage, a little bit like a flamingo. And this was just an opportunity where there was a pelican right by our boat, and I saw a gust of wind catch its head crest, and it just had this very quirky, unexpected appeal to it. You might not instantly know, looking at this, what it is. Is it a weird mushroom? Is it some kind of weird plant? This one just stood out as being very different in my portfolio of thousands of pelican photos. And the pelican's form was reduced to shape and gesture. After a while of taking lots of front-on photos of pelicans, you get a bit bored, you want to take different things, and it made me instantly chuckle when I saw it. So EXIF data, I was shooting 400mm lens. I mean, at that range, it was effectively like a macro lens, 1/600th of a second, and f7. So keeping enough of the bird in focus, but the really nice shallow background, very nice balance of harmonious colours, so it's very calming, but it's a very quirky, unexpected scene. So on to photo number 8 here. This is a grey seal. Again, a subject that I've photographed countless times. I have years and years worth of photos of seals, and on this particular morning, the light was so low and soft, cutting across the sand dunes. It's not a dramatic photo, and actually I almost didn't see it. There were lots of seals battling and also seals giving birth, but the sun just crept up over the dunes, catching the seal for about a minute or two in incredible soft golden light. And it's a good case for light telling the story, the play of light and shadow and tone and texture. I was shooting 600mm here, so the lowest aperture I could get was around f9, so getting really nice soft foreground. So sometimes if I want to get that little soft focus in front of my subject, I try to lower my camera as much as possible into the sand, and that gives you that nice little band of yellow focus which blends seamlessly into the background. And then the dark bit just above the seal is one of the sand dunes thrown in shadow because the sun was creeping up over it. So there's just a nice interplay of light and shadow, and again very monochromatic. Actually, a lot of my favourite photos this year have been 2 or 3 tones, and it just injects that little bit of extra atmosphere. So photo number 9, and this is a perfect example of returning to the same places time and time again and working the subject, working the places that you know. And this could be your own doorstep. It could be a place that you go on holiday every year, but it's only by working with the familiar that you can find the unfamiliar and find the extraordinary. And this is back in the Pyrenees. So Egyptian vulture, Pyrenees, Spain, in March last year. And this was a couple of days after I'd taken that previous photo, the Death-Mask one. So Egyptian vultures are one of the rare birds among parrots and crows that use tools. It picked up a pebble and was just tapping it against the hide window because it could see its reflection in the hide window, as you see here. Of course, this Egyptian vulture had no idea that I was in a hide, so it had me silently, inwardly screaming, thinking, please don't break this photographic glass window, but also rejoicing because I was inches away from this vulture that was very busy just checking out its reflection and showing this really unique behavior. And EXIF data, again, a lot of this is very secondary. I wanted to isolate the behavior, and I needed a relatively fast shutter speed just to capture any behaviors, but I'm shooting 1/400th of a second, so relatively fast. I had f5.6 to keep the subject beautifully sharp whilst throwing the background out of focus. It's a really clean blue sky, which harmonizes beautifully with that yellow flesh around the vulture's face. There was a tiny bit of a gust of wind, and also the vulture's just had a bath, so its feathers are really nice and expressive there. And really, the settings are secondary here. I just waited for the moment when the vulture was perfectly parallel with my lens, and it held the stone perfectly in the tip of its beak. So last but not least, and this is photo number 10. This is my favourite photo of the entire year, without a doubt. Another familiar subject, back to my home stomping grounds, just 10 minutes up the road from my house. This is a kingfisher diving. And what I love about this is a photo of a kingfisher, but very, very different. I photographed kingfishers many times, hunting, feeding, rearing their young, and this was one occasion where I managed to get it diving, and this is a shot that encompassed the essence of kingfisher for me. Trying to photograph a kingfisher's dive is equal parts patience and prediction, and a little bit of luck as well. And I wanted a photo that really showed everything I love about this bird. You know, the electric flash of colour, the needle-sharp accuracy of its beak, and the sheer speed that makes them feel almost unreal to watch. So the real skill behind taking this photo is anticipating when the kingfisher is going to dive, and it has these tiny little micro cues where it will bob its head up and down trying to suss out things in the water, but sometimes it just does it a little bit more prominently, and then you know it's probably going to dive. I used something called front curtain flash, and that's where I take the picture, both flashes fire, the shutter remains open for a little bit longer beyond the flash, and then closes. And what you get is you get the bird at the front of a flash completely frozen, and then this light trail, this motion trail that you see here, slightly like a Formula 1 race car, using that technique there to imply the precise speed of a kingfisher. So this is my favourite shot of 2025, kingfisher diving. So thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments right below which one was your favourite, and if you'd like more content like this and more educational content on wildlife photography, please consider subscribing to my channel. See you next time.